Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mom at Home. Another wonderful episode here at the Museum of Making Music. My name is BJ Morgan. I'll be your, I guess, the tech person behind the scenes. I'm actually going to let Mr. Bill run the conversation today with our very special guest, whom I'm very excited. Very pleased to have met him yesterday during soundcheck, and throughout the course of putting this episode together, just becoming more familiar with his work as a musician. Kris Johnson is a trumpeter. He's an educator, mentor, composer, arranger, and what has got to be my favorite aspect of his career is he's an audiovisual performing artist. And the body of work that he has put together and produced and put out there for the masses to see is just remarkable. I would encourage you to take a moment, and we'll share out his website after the show too. Discover what he's put together, because the sound, the music is just phenomenal. The artists that he has worked with and coordinated everything with is just amazing. So I'm so excited today to welcome Kris to this episode of Mom at Home, and we're actually going to talk about something really cool, which I don't have a lot of knowledge on. I'm a drummer. We don't know. I'm not going to speak for every drummer because there's a lot of smart drummers out there. I don't know much about this instrument, the Flugelhorn, and Kris is going to share all about this instrument with us because it is a part of his sound, a part of his unique identity as an artist. Not just a trumpet, but it's all over the place. So today, let's drop in Mr. Bill and Kris. Welcome to Mom at Home. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, BJ.
Yeah,
And
thanks so much
Chris,
for having me.
welcome. Thank you for joining us. BJ really laid that out well. You are such a multi-faceted talent, and it's such a pleasure to have you here. As a matter of fact, Kris, it was a good friend of the museum, Kamau Kenyatta, who suggested you to the museum as a guest. And as you know, as we all know, Kamau is a stellar player, an arranger, and an educator like yourself. And as I was talking to Kamau, working towards today, he said, the first time I ever saw Kris, I was blown away. So coming from Kamau, I'd say that's high praise indeed. Kris, could you sort of share with us more about how you and Kamau initially connected?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I mean, I'm just every time I talk to Kamal, I just feel so honored just to be able to to interface with him and have these conversations. I've always looked up to him musically, and his work has just been outstanding. He went to the same high school as my parents and several of my aunts and uncles. They were at Cass Technical High School here in Detroit, and I remember my dad actually telling me stories about Kamau when from when they were in high school together. My dad used to be a bass player, and they played bass. And my uncle Mark was a keyboardist, and they would perform together often as well. And I remember one day I had a performance, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe this was a performance of an orchestra suite that I had written, and I was performing it at Troy High School out here in the area. And all of a sudden, my uncle shows up with Kamal Kenyatta in the audience, and we got to talk just very, very briefly after. Stayed in touch ever since. He's become a really, really great friend. I remember for years, I would just always make sure I would keep him updated and just send him whatever I was working on. And then one day he saw one of the big band videos that I did during this quarantine period. He saw Yes or No, and he called me. And we've been talking, I'd say almost every day since then, just talking about music, working on projects. I've got to arrange a couple of his compositions for the big band as well. And just amazing musician, great mentor.
All around, so true. And he's been such a great mentor to so many of his own students personally here in San Diego. So what a great blessing that he was working with your Uncle Mark and you met him through that connection. And now you said you did an orchestral suite when you were in high school. Is that correct?
No, not when I was in high school. This was after college. I performed it with the Troy High School orchestra. And
Okay.
it just happened to come out to that performance.
I got it. Okay. Yeah, I hang on just one second. I did. I know this is lying, folks. I did see that video of that performance, and it was tremendous. So obviously, you come from a very artistic family. Your dad, your uncle. Did they sort of guide you in that direction to be a musician, to be an artist, or did you sort of feel that as a young
It
man?
actually, I would say it was the polar opposite for whatever
Mm.
for whatever reason. I would joke with my dad because his dream was for me to be an engineer. That was always his dream for
Hmm.
me. I kind of was pretty obsessed with math at one point, like around middle school, and had this obsession with multiplying and dividing numbers. He was just convinced that I was going to go on and become an engineer. So what he jokes now is that I approach music like an engineer in the way that I put things together. But no, for the longest time, they very much so didn't want me to go into the arts just because, stability and all the things, all the normal parent concerns. But after a while, I think hopefully by now, hopefully he's watching, I've proven that I can have a sustainable career in the arts. But no, honestly, yeah. By the time that I was, really coming up and getting into music, my uncle really wasn't playing anymore. My dad had a bass around the house, but he really wasn't playing much anymore. Got busy with work and all those things. So it was kind of on my own, but it was actually my cousin Lauren and I, who's a percussionist in my band, Lauren Johnson. Her father is Mark. And so she would be playing drum set, I'd be playing trumpet, and we would always just get together and play music. And I mean, essentially we were kind of playing like free jazz funk or something and just making music together and hanging out, and just decided, even though our fathers weren't really into it anymore, that it was something we really wanted to do. And it's pretty hilarious when we hang out now. We're like, we're still doing the same thing we were doing when we were like 8 and 10, right? Just picking up our instruments and messing around. It's pretty awesome.
That's cool.
And having fun. Bottom line, it's got to be fun.
Great time. Yeah, absolutely.
Now it has to really impress your dad and your uncle to see the success that you've had. And I certainly understand, we worry our parents to death by saying, I'm going to be a musician for a living, right? That's, you walk into this unstable career, and they want, as you said, your father wanted you to be an engineer. They want to help you out, guide you down that road. But we're glad you stuck with it. And as you said, Kamau asked you actually to arrange a couple of his pieces. We're going to see one here in just a few minutes. But you were looking up to him as, this awesome, stellar musician who was mentoring you in his own way. What was your reaction when he said, hey, I want you to arrange this piece for me?
Oh, man, it was immediate. It was like, okay, this is great. This is, I don't know if I've quite said it to him like this, but this is a moment I've been waiting for years. Like, come on, I've been trying to work with you for a long time, man. So to have that opportunity was absolutely fantastic. And it was a match made in heaven too. There was a lot of freedom that I had, but then also the suggestions and tweaks that he would make as I would sit on some of the mocks of the arrangements. And then especially as we got into the mixing phase, I actually learned a ton just by, mixing with him and kind of learning where his ear was and how much detail. Cause I think that's the thing that it really stands out about him as a musician and as a producer, is the amount of detail that he hears. He's very, very particular, but I find that to be like really, really positive. He's also just, yes, he's this master musician, he's this mentor, but he's incredibly respectful of my artistry and always encouraging me to put as much of myself into it as possible. And it's been great. It's been a really great partnership.
Yeah, having someone with that impressive of an ear, as you say, and attention to detail. It's interesting as you were saying that, Kris, because I got to thinking, well, there's that math brain at work, right? Because math is detail work, putting all these pieces together, coming out with an answer. And essentially, when you're arranging a piece of music, you're doing that. Putting all these little bits and pieces together, getting this tight and just right, and that in the right place, and then you have a beautiful piece of music. So, I do want to point out also, we're going to play an arrangement that you did for Kamau, and I do want to let everybody know that you and Kamau were very gracious. You granted us permission actually to include this in our gallery 2 of our renovated museum that's going to be opening up here soon, we all hope, and we thank you for that. So as you started to work on the piece, did you have a particular feel in mind as you began arranging the song? Latin, funk?
It's interesting because the original small group recording that he sent me was already so strong and had so much of a stamp. I immediately jumped to, if I'm going to say something and if I'm going to do something with this piece and I'm being asked to arrange it, I want to do something that's unique. I want to add something to the conversation. And so I think one of the conversations that we had with it was that there was that openness to add on to it. He immediately was very gracious and just said, add on to this, do, what makes sense for you. If you hear something, throw it in there. The very first mock I sent him actually was just of the melody. And I think I had like flipped the feel a little bit with like a little bit of a heavier swing feel. And he's like, I want it to be straight A's. That's the only, it has to be that. And so right from there, I knew exactly what to do. And different elements start to come to me, and I just built it up from there. And we worked kind of side by side with him hearing the mock-ups, and again, he loved what he heard, and we got to the final product, and I'm really, really proud of it.
As you should be. So Kamal, as you said, gave you a little nudge in a direction that he wanted it to go, and then you took it and ran with it from there. So what can you share with us what your arranging process is? Because as anybody who does this knows, it's like getting a box, a jigsaw puzzle. You got a bunch of pieces. Now we're going to start putting this all together to create this arrangement, right?
Right.
So I'd like to know what your process is. Where do you start? Rhythm section, brass? Do you have different ideas kicking in? And also tell us about the video itself, because it's magical, and everybody will see that when we watch it.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much. That's very kind. So with my arranging process, to me, I'm really thinking of it as a marriage and a partnership between melody, harmony, and groove. Like those are really like the three main components. And then what kind of like the interplay is going to be counterpoint as well with that. So the first thing that I'm doing when I'm starting off is kind of documenting and deciding how I want the melody to be phrased. So I'll go into Logic Pro, which is the digital audio workstation that I use, and I'll load up, lock in the tempo, and then I'll just record the melody. And I'll have just the melody going where I can hear the click, I can hear the beat, and I can hear the melody. Then from there, I just allow myself to dream a bit. Then it starts to really become like, okay, I'll start with one extra element. I have this melody in place, and I know the way that I want that melody to feel. Let's try something rhythmically. Let's try putting a different feel underneath this rhythmically. And then everything else is influenced by that. Or let's start, let's pick a random note. Sometimes it is random. Pick a random note and let me move through a sequence of notes and let that be the root motion of the chord progression and try to make it work. I use a term a lot of times with my students called justification, where I remember I was reading a book. I think it was a book by Wynton Marsalis about being on the road. And he was talking about a conversation that he had with different musicians. He was kind of talking about like kind of like one-off pieces of advice that he received from different master musicians. And I believe it was when he got to a section about Art Farmer, where he said, go to the piano and get comfortable with the combination of any bass note with any melody note, because there's no such thing as a bad pairing. I took that and just ran with it. And I've studied a lot of Thad Jones. Thad Jones is like one of my biggest arranging inspirations. And so justification is really like, okay, it's like it is an equation. This is where my math background comes in, I guess. It's if I have this A flat in the melody, I should be able to put any note underneath that and make it sound good. So I'll really just play along with the A flat on top and then try any combination of bass notes. So sometimes I will sometimes randomly pick a bass line or a bass motion, and then I'll just justify my use of the combination of that melody note with the bass note. So it's just a reharmonization technique that, that plenty of people do, but I'm a little obsessed with it. And I just play around almost like it's a playground until I find something that really speaks to me. Like, that's it. That's the combination. That's the starting point. Then from that framework, once I know, like I have my melody phrasing, I have the harmonic rhythm of how I want to accompany this. Now I have the bass notes. Now I decide on the harmony. Then I can add in counterpoint. And the whole time I'm using a lot of technology to go along with that. I think one of the benefits that we have in this generation is that I can record myself playing the melody. I can record some mock drums using, native instruments or whatever in my DAW. And then I can take that, and every note that I write in the arrangement, I can hear how it relates to that sound. So the idea is that I'm basically kind of creating a virtual band of just myself before the musicians even touch it. And so my thing is, I'm not the best, keyboard drummer in the world. I'm not the best fake bass player in the world. But if I can make my mock-up sound good, if I can be happy with the way that it sounds on my own, then I know when the musicians touch it, it's going to be magic.
I love that term playground, because that's exactly what it is. You said a couple things in there. I just want to make sure all our viewers understand what you mean by that.
Okay.
Just a second ago, you used the word DAW, and it's something we actually just studied in our renovation training. But just for sort of reminder's sake for everybody watching, what do you mean when you say DAW?
So a DAW is a digital audio workstation. And essentially, you could think of it as kind of being a laboratory, a musical laboratory that lives on your computer. So you can use it to play different instruments and record them. You can use it to arrange music. You can use it to mix. You can use it to master. It's pretty much all things music housed inside of your computer, and it's pretty remarkable. And honestly, it's the reason why we were able to have success with this virtual band, because everybody that I was working with had DAWs, and so we had these little mini recording studios living in our basements and in our living rooms.
What a world we live in now, right? That's
Yeah,
fantastic. So when you say mock-up, then basically, Kris, what you're doing is you are creating the sound of what the overall arrangement would be when it's played live, but it's in this DAW or digital audio workstation environment.
Right,
And
right.
you can send that to the players and they can all hear what their parts are.
Exactly. So by the time the musicians, this is kind of like the hierarchy, right? And I think after we watch the video, people will appreciate it more. But essentially, I create a mock bass, drums, and piano in the DAW, so that way you can have like a pretty realistic sounding samples of what that sounds like, and then I export that as an MP3, bring that into Finale, which is the notation program that I use, and I can actually hear that MP3 of what I did in the DAW as I'm notating in Finale. So every time I write a line, you can hear the way that line sounds against a strong mock-up. When I send it to the musicians, I first send it to lead trumpet, lead trombone, and lead saxophone. They record their parts along with my mock rhythm section. Then once I have their leads established, I send that out to the sections. The saxophones never hear each other, but they hear the lead. So as long as second alto, first tenor, second tenor, Barry all follow the lead and are playing along with the same mock track, then theoretically they'll all be tight and precise. Same thing for trumpets and trombones. Rhythm section, you would think. Now, I will say, I would encourage most bands, if they didn't have the kind of like scary, and I really do mean like terrifying connection that my rhythm section has, because they really are interconnected in a really freaky way. What's interesting is that in most cases, I would say we should have, the drummer lay down his part first. The bass player should listen to the drummer, and the piano player should hear the bass and the drums together, and you get the ideal product. With this, I actually kind of enjoy the challenge of not letting them hear each other. So my drummer is recording. He has all the horns in his ear because I do the rhythm section last so they can react to it. He only hears my mock bass and piano. The bassist only hears my mock drums and mock piano. Same thing with the keyboard player. Then when it comes together, by some miracle, every single time they blow my mind, and they have these moments where they play the exact same rhythm that wasn't written in the arrangement. They have some sort of musical answering call and response.
It's the force, man. Every bass drummer,
force,
it's intuitive. The more you work with your bass player, and you guys, the musicians that you have on your team are insanely good. And yeah, it's I can't imagine, because you've basically taken what a typical studio recording process and flipped it upside down, all the way. Usually, in my experiences, you would build the rhythm section first and then have everybody build on top of that. But this is completely. I'm amazed every time I watch this video. I'm like, how did he do this? How did he do this? And now I know, and that's so cool how you put that together. Awesome.
I appreciate that. And I do have I actually created an online course that breaks down my entire process of how I do this. So I kind of walk the students through in this online course how I create the mock-up, the instructions for the musicians, the video settings, and I even give them access to both video and audio stems that the musicians sent to me, and then walk them through a tutorial of this is how you put this together. It's called virtual band production.
Awesome.
And so I think we're going to be in the space for a while longer. I just wanted to empower people to be able to have the chance to dig into that.
Wow, that's cool.
I mean, that's a priceless learning tool, Kris. And it obviously they're going to learn how to do the process, but in the process of learning your process, they're going to become stronger musicians as well. Right. We've been teasing people for a while about this video. I do want to ask one question from Brian, from our volunteer, Brian. It's a great question too. It ties right into what we were just talking about. Brian asks, Kris, can you hear all of this in your head before using your DAW?
Sometimes. That's kind of my nebulous answer. Yeah, honestly, I'd say most of the things that I'm recording down, I'm just translating the ideas that are in my head. But there is something, very physical there's a very physical experience you have when you start working in the DAW, because as soon as I might have one idea in my head of how I want the drums to sound. As I start spelling it out, when I touch the keys, it's a different thing. When I add in the bass that I recorded to the drum track might change the way that I want to lay down the drum track, and I might redo it. And then all of that doesn't matter anyway, because my drummer, Nate Wynn, is just going to come in and just destroy it and just sound way better anyway. But yeah, very much so. It's a lot of it. I think all the different sides of the brain are working at once. So I'm using my intellect, I'm using my ears, I'm using, technical skills of how the program works to my advantage. That's very much so a part of the arranging process. So just somehow it all just kind of like twirls around and works together in my head. It makes sense to me. But hopefully
and there's so much gratification in hearing, like you say, your drummer just crushed the part, your bass player playing things that, wow, okay, that's where I was kind of heading, but he took it to the next level. She took it to a whole nother world. So there's some great satisfaction in that for you as an arranger, and for the musicians as well, who are climbing on board to make this magic come alive. Yeah. I do have another question. I promise we're going to get to this video.
But this is an appropriate follow-up question. So yeah,
it's perfect.
Okay, great.
Follow-up. From Elmas, and Chrissy asks, how long is the process using a DAW?
The process of creating the arrangement, or the process of learning how to use the DAW? That's what I'm curious.
Boy. Those are two different.
I'll answer both.
Okay.
I'll answer both. Cool. I'll answer both. Learning the DAW, sometimes I'm embarrassed to say this, but I went through 6 years of college. I did undergraduate and graduate school, and the only computer program I used consistently for music was Finale. I was just like, well, if I create sheet music, then I'll always have musicians. I didn't really do anything else outside of that. It was at the end of grad school that I first started to work with, a little bit of sequencing in a DAW. And then on my first tour with the Count Basie Orchestra after grad school, I bought my first Mac and with my first paycheck, my first Mac and my first MIDI controller and audio interface, and just decided I'm going to go digital.
Yeah.
And that was actually at the recommendation of my good friend Solomon Parham. So thank you, Solomon, for pushing me in that direction. So this was 2008. So I think I'm pretty good with it now. So I'd say about 13 years to learn a DAW. But in all seriousness, it's project based. The more that you dive in and start giving yourselves projects to work on, the more that you'll learn the program, and just set reasonable goals in the beginning. The great part is that, there's so much information out there now about how to get started. I'd say you could be pretty fluent within a few months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime you run into a dead end or a wall, just get on YouTube and look for a solution. I'm sorry, BJ.
No worries. And plus, the rate at which we are able to share ideas and communicate, on the internet anymore, it's like you might find someone halfway across the world that says come up with a unique, nobody's ever done this in Logic X before, and now he's like, it's a new process that just goes worldwide. You're always, I'm always learning. At least I use Digital Performer, it's very old school, but I'm always learning like little corners of this program that I've never explored before, and then I try incorporating it into a workflow, and it's like I can't imagine living without it now. So I think there's always something to learn. Man. Yeah.
It's vast. There's just so much to learn. There's so many different techniques. But the great part is, I think, just like making music, do you ever master your instrument? Do you ever master how to improvise? No, you're just constantly learning and growing. Yeah. So my thing is, get in there, learn enough to start making music, and then make music. And you'll learn the programs more. In terms of the actual mock-up process, I write like pretty fast. Once I have an idea in my head, I'll sit down for an hour or two and get at least the mock-up portion of the rhythm section. I'll get that idea out almost immediately and I plan out every single rehearsal letter. Everything that I would do on a chart, I do all of that in Logic. Plan out every rehearsal marker, every tempo change, all of that. And then the actual arranging process from there, honestly, sometimes a day or two, depending on how much time I have available. But again, I tend to work really fast, mainly just because I'm just so excited I can't stop writing.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I'll just be up for hours like, oh yeah, I should probably eat and take a shower.
Sleep might be a good idea too, right? But
wait, what's that?
You go down that rabbit hole and the creative juices start going. I hear you. You just don't want to stop.
Exactly.
Well, let's share this video. This is a song written by Kamau Kenyatta. And now, was this the first of his pieces that he asked you to arrange, Kris?
Yes, this was the first one. Yeah.
This is called Peter Cobia.
Wow. That's so cool. Awesome. Here, let me get back to the camera. Oh, shoot. I didn't play the ending credits there. I apologize about that. Because there's some good ending credits. Go to YouTube and go check out the rest of the credits. I totally forgot that they were there. I just watched this recently too. I should have known better. Oh wow, so cool. And we did have, and now I did just see some questions popping up on the live feed as we were rolling through. Here we go. Pam did ask, is this recorded live? If so, how do you avoid the latency over the issues? And Kris, do you want to kind of explain the process, maybe just a quick summary of how this was quickly put together, just to recap that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And no, it's not recorded live, because latency is just so difficult. And two, I didn't want it to just be okay, we got the band in squares and we got one shot, and it's just going to be that one shot the whole time. You can see we kind of moved around
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit. So I mentioned before kind of the order that we recorded in, but essentially every musician records themselves in their DAW, which I know is a new
Right.
vocabulary word for some of our audience members. They record their audio in a DAW and send me professional stems or different parts, different parts of their microphone. For example, the drummer will send me a separate microphone for his kick drum and a snare drum, etc. So they'll send me all those files you would normally do in a recording session. But at the same time, I had them all shoot a horizontal, landscape video of themselves as they were performing. And so I have to kind of do two different things. They send me all the stems. I put that together in Logic and have to create a mix of what the music will sound like. And then they also send me a video, and I'm using Adobe Premiere
Hmm.
to edit all the videos together. So I created frames in Photoshop. And basically, every time that you see a new shot where it's a different amount of musicians on the screen, that's a new frame that I had to resize everybody to fit in each individual box. Um, so shameless plug. If you check out my course, Virtual Band Production, you get to see how I put
All right. What's the
all that
website?
stuff together.
What's the website?
It's office hours with chrisjohnson.com, and Kris Johnson is spelled with a K. And yeah, you can check out a couple of different courses I have on there, including virtual band production at office hours with Kris Johnson.
It's so.
And Kris, you can also find that link on your main website, right? Which
Oh,
is
absolutely. It's on my main website and all of my socials as well. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, I spent a good amount of time in your website this past week because your bio is stunning, the videos, the workshops, the classes. So I recommend everybody, chrisjohnsonmusic.com. And again, that's Kris with a K.
Thank you so
So
much.
as I was perusing your website, listening to your music and hearing what you've done, a phrase sort of popped into my mind, Kris, and that was stylistic diversity. What I mean by that is you're dipping into so many different styles of music. How do you move so comfortably from one style to another?
I mean, to me, it's all the same language,
Mm.
It's all pulling from the same things. We're, with any style of music that we're making, we're using our bodies, we're using our ears, we're using our voices to create music and to communicate emotion, to communicate ideas. So to me, it's all coming from the same place. I'm also a very firm believer of this idea that any music that came out of the African American tradition is all coming from what I refer to as Black American music, which is a term that Nicholas Payton coined. And I really think of all the musical genres as being that. A lot of this music that we're hearing and that we're studying every single day is all coming from Black America.
Mm.
So to me, all of that is a part of who I am as a person. All of that is part of who all of us are. I mean, if we listen from anything from Jimi Hendrix to the Beatles to Motown to funk to gospel, that's all coming from the Black American experience. So I think it's very universal. And so to me, they're all the same, and song by song, artist by artist, track by track, recording by recording. They'll have their differences, but I kind of interface with them all in a
Mm.
very, very similar way.
So you say it's all the same language, which is absolutely true. Music is a language, and it is all the same language. I guess you could almost look at the notes and the rhythms as being maybe the words, the sentences, and the paragraphs. And depending on how those are spoken in language, will delineate what language you're speaking, or in terms of music, maybe what style of music you're playing. A Baroque style would be more sort of straight, 1 and 2 and 3 and, where a swing tune is going to have that swing feel to it. Same language, different sentences and phrases. Do you, I know you said it's all one language. Do you have a particular passion for one over the other, or you just love them all?
I just love music. And honestly, I think what it is I think I approach music similar to the way that someone might approach like a film or a drama. It's about the story for me. The notes and the rhythms and the chords and all that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm a huge theory nerd. Like it's bad. I have a real problem. Um, but to me, all of that is like stuff that I want to get out of the way. I want to know so much about that so that it's second nature, so that my palette is as wide as possible. I just want to have as many things and many colors and textures available so that I can get down to telling a story.
Mm.
So I can really build. To me, I'm also kind of like world building. I'm creating a world in which my musicians can play. So as I have a big band, yes, I organized it. Yes, it has my name on it. But the band, there's a lot of ownership between every single band member because it means so much more when they start to interact with the music. So I'm really trying to create a space for them, and I see it very similar as a screenwriter or director would. We're going to put all these people in this place and we're going to create this world and we're going to document it, but ultimately it's largely dependent on the way that these musicians or actors communicate with one another and the type of chemistry that they have. We're just trying to, I think, as a band leader, facilitate that relationship and that storytelling.
It's very generous of you, really, Kris, to share the ownership with the band as you do. That's not a unilateral trait in band leaders, so I applaud you for that. And in Peter Cobia, we were seeing you play the flugelhorn, I believe. I'd like to kind of talk a bit about that instrument. The tone of your horn is very smooth, very relaxing. How much of that is the nature of the horn itself, and how much of it is your approach to playing the flugelhorn?
Uh, I'd say it's definitely a little bit of both. I would say there's some similar things that I do very purposely on trumpet that when I do it on flugelhorn, it exaggerates it in a really, really terrific way. It's a very, very expressive instrument. Both my trumpet and my flugelhorn are made by a company called Cannonball Instruments, and I'm very, very thankful for my endorsement with them. Great company, and I love these instruments very, very much. And yeah, I think there are definitely some physical choices that I'm making that are unique on the instrument. But at the same time, you're going to get a darker sound if you're playing on a flugelhorn. You're going to kind of have a little bit more air in the tone. And I love air in my trumpet tone too. So it just kind of honestly just kind of elevates that. It's like, wow, I can take something that's already airy and add more air to it. To me, that's just kind of like life. That's like where the juice of the horn is,
Choices, what it's all about. Well, could we maybe do a little compare and contrast? I think you have both those horns there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Describe why one looks this way, the other looks the other way. Similarities, differences.
Sure. We can get down to all that. So this is a trumpet. All right. So essentially, honestly, they're very, very similar. Each instrument actually has the same amount of tubing. It's the same pitch. It's in the same octave. In terms of how high or low it plays, they both have 3 valves available, and you blow air and buzz through this mouthpiece here, and it produces sound out the end. I think the difference is the shape of the tubing ends up kind of creating like a very, very unique sound. One thing that I always love to demonstrate is I always, tell people I think of the trumpet and really the trombone and the flugelhorn as well as being 7 different instruments in one. In the sense that you only have 7 different valve positions that I can play on the trumpet. There's only 7 different combinations that work in terms of how I play these 3 valves. There's only 7 of them. So if you're working with the overtone series, you have the exact same thing. I just transpose it down 7 times. And so I love demonstrating this. I'll just give you a little example. So really all that magic that trumpet players are making, we're making that moving, navigating between 7 instruments. Now, of course, nobody thinks of that way. It's kind of a complicated way of approaching the instrument, but really as you're moving up and down, that you have to keep that in mind, that like the original bugles or the original trumpets didn't have any valves. And so you'd have a trumpet that's in one key. So if I'm playing in the key of F, then I would have like, a bugle in the key of F, and anything I played had to be on that overtone series that I was just describing. You had very limited notes. So as I'm first playing the instrument, when I play with no valves pushed down, the air's coming in through here. It's going through this tubing, but it's bypassing this piece of tubing, this piece of tubing, and this piece of tubing. Those aren't being played at all. And so the instrument has one sound. When I push the second valve down, it's actually giving me access to this tubing. It's making the instrument that much bigger. When the instrument gets that much bigger, then the instrument gets that much lower, and it just goes down by a half step. And and so forth. So every time I add a valve, I'm really adding on to the instrument. So I always find that very fascinating. As people are kind of checking out the way the trumpet is set up. It's the same thing as like, a trombone player is moving their slide down. They're making their instrument slightly bigger as they go. The 7 slide positions of the trombone are actually parallel to the 7 valve positions of a trumpet or a tuba or anything like that.
So again, going back to math, there's a lot of mathematics involved in how that was set up, right?
A lot of math. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Now, when we see trumpet players playing in a big band in a solo setting or solo trumpet with a band, oftentimes they're using what we call mutes. And I see behind you, there's quite a collection of mutes on the wall.
Yes.
Could you maybe give us a quick little history on how the mutes work, what they're doing to change your tone?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so essentially, this is I love this collection. It's a collection of mutes from a company called Cleary Wood Mutes that I've fallen in love with. But essentially, it's just adding a little bit more timbre to your sound. It might add a little bit of buzz. It might muffle it a little bit. It'll just add in, different textures as you go. From my years playing with the Count Basie Orchestra, mutes were like a huge part of what we would do because you have this big, powerful brass section. But let's say you want to mellow it out and you throw a bucket mute on, and all of a sudden it's it kind of softens the tone a bit and you have a much different sound. Let's say that you want to take the brass sound and kind of make it have a little bit more of a buzz, and you throw in a harmon mute or a straight mute. Just every mute kind of gives you a different flavor. I just think of them as spices. You could make the same chicken as many times as you want to, but if you use some cayenne pepper versus some curry or some paprika, it's the same meat, but you can color it a lot of different ways.
How much of the mute usage would be indicated by the arranger, or how much of it is just what you're feeling at the moment?
I would say within the context of a soloist could easily make the choice to put in a mute or not put in a mute. But 9 times out of 10, it's definitely dictated by the arranger to say, take this solo with a straight mute or a cup mute or a harmon mute. And then in terms of the section, it's very much so like that's a large part of the arranging technique is to decide what section should be in different mutes. And it's pretty much standard. Almost any brass player's gonna have a harmon mute, a cup mute, a straight mute, a plunger mute, and a bucket mute. And you're just supposed to have those on deck so that any arrangement that you're playing, the arranger might call out that sound and then you interface with it.
And have you got, by any chance, the Flugelhorn there with you as well? So
I do have the Flugelhorn.
See the physical difference and hear it?
Yeah, so I love this beauty. She's wonderful. I love the color difference in terms of the the material that was used. And yeah, believe it or not, even though it looks like everybody always assumes this is bigger, it's not. I mean, if it was bigger, then it would physically like sound lower. It would be in a different key. It's just the tubing's just spread out a little differently, and so you end up getting a different sound. But yeah, to me, it's a little bit warmer and fluffier. And here, I'll play a melody on trumpet, and then maybe I'll do the same melody on flugelhorn, and our audience members can kind of get a feel for what that's like. All right, so that's a little bit of a Thelonious Monk's Around Midnight on trumpet. And here it is on flugelhorn.
Sweet.
Yeah. The adjective I took to was when you said fluffier. I've never used that in my way to describe a sound before. I'm gonna adopt that word into my dictionary of how to describe sound now, because that's exactly what I tuned in with too when you started that flow. It just sounds like the edges are just tapered off, and you get this warmth, and you get the fluffiness of it, the fullness of it. Yeah, wow.
See? Yeah, I mean, I spent
I've got it now.
6 years in music school. I have a master's degree, and I still refer to instruments as being fluffy. But I think it serves the instrument way better than any technical term of, well, technically the timbre is, no, it's fluffy.
Yeah,
I think Fluffy's pretty
that's
accurate.
perfect.
It personalizes the instrument much more if you use a nice warm term like fluffy rather than.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep that word, and I'm gonna put that one in my pocket for a long time now. So
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Uh, and so the valve configuration then on the flugelhorn is exactly the same as the trumpet.
Exactly the same. And I'll be honest with you, you know, I don't actually practice flugelhorn. That probably sounds insane. I do all of my technical studies, all of my instrument technique is done on trumpet. Trumpet is a very unforgiving instrument, but all of the same techniques that I use on trumpet, I use on flugelhorn. I just get the benefit of the warmer sound. Now, of course, I'm not saying that I don't spend time practicing a melody on flugelhorn, because I will try to get even more air out of the tone, different expressiveness. But in terms of the technical study on the instrument, all of that work has been done on trumpet for me. And I find that it all translates over very well. Then it's more about being expressive, the differences in being expressive when I get to flugelhorn.
Different colors, different instrument, slightly different approaches to creating that
Absolutely.
expressiveness.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell everybody again, please make sure you go to krisjohnsonmusic.com. Just take a look around the website because you're going to see that he's appeared on 5 Grammy-nominated albums. You composed the that's a tough one for me to say, Emmy-nominated web series titled King Ester. You toured, as you said, with the Count Basie Band, director of jazz studies at the University of Utah, commissioned to compose Hastings Street, the musical. So much going on in your life, Kris. And also on top of all that, you are an educator. One of the things I found on your website is this very cool series you call Office Hours with Kris Johnson. Could you tell us a little bit about it and what inspired you to create that series?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was teaching at University of Utah, I found that the classes that I was teaching, of course, gave me a great opportunity to reach a lot of students and work with them and do a lot of detailed work in a kind of a lecture format. But I also noticed that students would just constantly be showing up to my office. And any professor traditionally has office hours, right? But I would find that there was something really, really special about creating a safe space in my office where we could talk about music and students could ask direct questions, not just questions that were led by whatever the syllabus said that we were going to talk about that day. And so I just found that it was like a really great educational opportunity to be able to dive into different things. And then also I had the benefit, my office was my favorite place to teach because I had all of my technology right there. I had my MIDI controller, I had my microphone. I could demonstrate so much more than I could in a classroom. So I just decided to go digital with it and really to create a community. It's a series of courses and online courses and that's and resources. That's great, but it's really about the community that I've been able to create, working with different students and being able to give them an opportunity internationally to learn lessons in a way that are really designed for the 21st century musician. So as we really think about the different types of learners there are, we're going to have students who need to touch things. We have students who are oral learners. They're going to need to hear it. They're going to need to see it. I really try to approach my lessons in a way where it touches on all the different senses and all the different educational approaches. So that's really what Office Hours with Kris Johnson is about. It's about answering questions, working with musicians on things they wouldn't necessarily learn in this format in a collegiate setting. And it's really like a great supplemental tool to be able to kind of get all the things out of my head that I've taught over and over again into an accessible digital format.
And the key word there, Kris, is international. Again, another thing that today's technology allows us to do, reach students internationally. Now, I watched the introductory video. Well, I'm having trouble with my words today. I watched your introductory video called Progressions You Should Know. And in that video, Kris, you stated, learning harmony on the piano keyboard is a universal skill that translates to any musician, regardless of what their instrument or musical style is. So now, what is it about the piano that makes that the ideal instrument for learning harmony and composing and arranging music?
I think it takes us back to even what I was just describing a moment ago, where I was talking about the different type of learners. You have everything available when you play the piano. First of all, it's incredibly visual and symmetrical. So you can see the symmetry, you can see everything laid out. Everything's very, very clear. I like to think of it as like a moment, like if you're watching, like a movie like The Matrix,
Mm.
where you can slow everything down and everything goes in slow-mo, and suddenly you have access to, oh, that's what this piece is. Whereas on trumpet, and other instruments, sometimes we don't really have that visual. But everything's laid out so clean and organized. It's beautiful on the piano. So there's the visual aspect. There's also, you can play harmony in such a wide range and really play around with different combinations and understand the function of harmony, how harmony wants to move, how it wants to behave. And it's really an ideal laboratory. And then I also love that it's also very physical.
Hmm.
And you have physical access to the harmony. It's not just, oh, okay, a B flat 7 chord wants to move to an E flat major chord. It's like, no, okay, I know that theoretically, but I can also see how B flat is the fifth of E flat and wants to move to the one. I can also see how the third and seventh of B flat 7, the D and the A flat, want to move in, and I can feel how satisfying that is to make that resolve inward to the E flat and the G of the E flat chord. So to me, it's really ideal for students because they have everything at their fingertips and they can create, they can explore, and they can become very physical and very visual with the instrument and with the harmony.
So it's gratifying both in the oral sense, in what you're hearing, but also in the physical sense and seeing you make those movements. And it's also interesting to look at a piano keyboard because it really is laid out in chunks. Each octave, if you lifted it and dropped it up the octave, it's the exact same formation. Guitar is somewhat visual, and yet it doesn't have that same visuality as a keyboard does. So I think that's a very strong recommendation. I do have a couple more questions from Brian, if that's okay.
Yeah, of
Brian
course.
asks, have you tried different mouthpieces with the Flugelhorn to get different tones?
I have, but I do have a confession about gear. I spend way more time researching studio gear and audio gear and computer software than I do with anything trumpet related. I know it's bad. I have this habit of playing on whatever someone recommends me to play on. So the story behind almost every instrument, I think, um, when I was in high school, my dad took me and helped me buy, it bought me a box Stradivarius trumpet. That's probably the most research that I ever put into any instrument. Was like, okay, I've talked to a lot of people. This is the best instrument, and you bought it for me. Thank you, Dad. And after that, every instrument that I played was because, or mouthpiece that I played was because somebody came along and said, "Hey, I think you'd really benefit from this mouthpiece. Here, try this." I put it on my horn. All right, yeah, feels good to me. And I just play on it until someone else would come along and give me something else and say, hey, you should try this trumpet. Hey, you should try this mouthpiece. Like literally every single one. Because my thing was, okay, I mean, I'm so imperfect at the instrument, as I think every trumpet player feels. There's just so much work to do. I'm like, I don't care what I put on there. Either way, I'm gonna lose. Like there's no way to win with this instrument. So I might as well get as good as possible on any instrument that I play. And so, I'd get a mouthpiece, but again, every time, a lot of times it was my friend. I mentioned my friend Solomon Parham, great friend and mentor of mine. Most of the stuff I've ever played on is because he's probably sent me something in the mail. It's like, hey, Chris, you should play on this mouthpiece. And then I play on it, and he's usually right. I was very fortunate when I was at University of Utah. Cannonball Instruments just happened to be located in Salt Lake City.
Hmm.
And so one of my faculty members actually was working with there, Randall Clark, and invited me to come by. And same thing. I went in, I tried out some different instruments. I was like, I like that one, and just played on it. And it was great. And they were wonderful and gracious and let me try all the different horns. I just play on things until it doesn't make sense to play on them anymore. So no, I haven't experimented with a million mouthpieces just because I'm just not, I don't know. I'm just not that guy.
Hmm.
But like MIDI controllers, oh yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going to research that to death and pick out what MIDI controller I want, or, different samples. I don't know. That's just the way I think.
You've got all these playgrounds in your studio, and it's really hard to be able to give an equal amount of time to each one. I certainly understand.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
want to talk about looping here in just a second. We're almost up to the hour, so I want to respect your time. One more question from Brian, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you do with looping because it's fascinating. I want everybody
Okay,
to see it
yeah.
and hear it. So Brian asks, do you think there's a major tonal difference between the trumpets and the cornets?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think trumpet, cornet, flugelhorn. I think with any of those instruments, it's all, there's definitely some major differences between them. I haven't spent a lot of time playing the cornet, but definitely there's definitely a noticeable difference. I think about Nat Adderley and the unique sound that he had, playing everything that he played on cornet. I mean, just like a really, really great sound. So for sure, I think with any instrument in the brass family, you're going to get a very different sound.
Which I think is why each iteration comes along. Somebody has an idea for a different sound.
Exactly.
You change this a little bit, tweak that a bit. Now you've got a similar instrument that produces a different sound. Guitarists are guilty of that. If you want that sort of classical sound, you've got to have nylon string guitar. If you want to rock out, a Strat or a Paul or a Telly. Telly if you're playing country, acoustic steel if you want to play some really banging rhythm. It's all similar tools with different end results.
Right.
Speaking of playgrounds, you have obviously, I'm going to say mastered, even though you'll probably push back. No, there's still more to learn. Your use of looping, Kris, is really stunning. And we're going to finish out this afternoon playing a beautiful video that you put together, which I'll have you tell everybody about before we play it. But give us just kind of a sort of a very cursory definition of what looping is for people who are not familiar with it.
For sure. And I do want to say to all the people who are truly masters of looping out there, I think Bill is being very kind, but I appreciate it. You're being very gracious. So essentially, looping is taking a short phrase, sometimes a long phrase, but let's say a short phrase, and using, in this case, in my case, an iPad to play that phrase one time and then have it played over and over again. So I'll play one phrase and we'll see it demonstrated, and it'll play over and over again. And that becomes kind of the basis for which you can layer more loops and really be able to create songs as a solo musician where you're adding in different elements in the moment and creating a playground that you can play with of just how you layer in different things. And I like to experiment with not only how I layer them on trumpet, but utilizing anything around me, a table, a didgeridoo, a shaker. I have, at one point, I have this like Moscow Mule cup that I have, and I keep a bracelet in there. And I love the sound of it, of just the Moscow Mule with a bracelet inside, but really just using as many natural elements as possible, or synthesizers or anything like that, to create more and more layers of music. So essentially you start with one thing and you build it out into a full song.
So once you've created a loop, you can play ad infinitum until you stop it.
Yep. And with the particular program I have, it has space for 12 different, Loopy HD is the name of the program that I use. It has space for 12 different loops to be used at a time. And so I usually try to get creative with the arrangement, think of up to 12 different layers that I want to bring in, and then just kind of in real time create those loops, put them on top of each other. The benefit of a program like Loopy HD, as opposed to some other ones, is you can play with panning. Like if you're wearing a pair of headphones, I can decide, well, this loop's going to come out of this ear, this loop's going to come out of this ear, this loop's going to be here, this is going to be here. There's different placements that you can get into that are really useful. You can reverse things, you can fade things in and out as you go. You have a lot of freedom that you wouldn't necessarily have with some other devices. So to each their own, but I personally really love Loopy. Plus, I'm way more of a software person than I am a hardware. I like to keep my hardware pretty simple and then really just build up and beef up the software.
As I was watching the video, and we'll see when we watch it here in a moment, that's one of the things that caught my eye, was that you have this iPad with, they almost look like little circular loopers, I guess.
Loops, yeah. They're
what I've seen before is just a little stop box that somebody will hit the on off button with, but this is, to me, much more advanced. So we'll play the song and the video in just a second here. It is titled hashtag, trying to be hip here, hashtag Loop Therapy number 5 for Brianna. And if I didn't get that title correct, please do correct me. But Kris, what was the inspiration for this piece we're about to see?
This piece is dedicated to Breonna Taylor, who was brutally murdered. And, as we're aware, they're just you can't really count the number of people, particularly Black people, that have been killed by the hands of police and through police brutality and racism and a number of different reasons that have built up to to this. And this piece was dedicated for Breonna Taylor, and it's actually an arrangement of a famous spiritual entitled "Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child."
Beautiful. Well, Kris, I'm going to say thank you for this afternoon. It's been an inspiration, an education, and I hope everybody watching has learned a whole lot about music, education, arranging, picking your instrument, following your passion, and most importantly, having fun. So on behalf of those of us here at Mom at Home, Kris, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really, truly been a pleasure. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Here we go. That was, hold on a second. Let me get back here. Too many buttons there. Man, that was amazing. I would say that was probably the most amazing use of looping. One person to be able to create that and to be inspired. I can't. I'm sorry. Thank you, Kris. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I'm always amazed by these episodes, and this one just it was beautiful, and I appreciate your time, Bill and Kris, and I appreciate your music, Kris, and I hope you continue to make it for as long as we are all able. That being said, one more time, thank you, gentlemen, so much for being part of this program, and thank you for being here. I'm going to, wipe my nose, and I'm actually going to talk about what's coming up. How about we do that? All right, Scarlett Rivera. I'm verklempt now, jeez. Scarlett Rivera is going to be with us next week, February 12th, our next episode of Mom at Home. She is a violinist and has started her career with Bob Dylan, and we're going to talk with her next week and learn more about her career and her experience with the violin. Following that, February 19th, we have Ralph Grierson, studio keyboardist. She's recorded with just a wide variety of people. John Williams, I think Cage, and just so many more. And he is now focusing his career on music and health. So it's a wonderful topic that we're going to be talking about February 19th. And then very final Friday of February, that's a lot of alliteration unintentionally, we are going to host Ed Rossetti here on February 26th at 2 p.m. Ed's a very good friend of the museum as well, percussionist, educator, author. He is going to explore what it's like to be a percussion clinician, and we're going to wrap up February that way. Other than that, let me get back to our guests at hand. This was a wonderful episode. It's probably one of my favorites so far. So I appreciate you, Kris, for being here. One more time for Kris's website is Kris Johnson Music, Kris with a K, Kris, johnsonmusic.com. And all of the wonderful things that he's doing as far as an audiovisual performer, the things that we saw happen today in his videos, looping, video production with, disperse a variety of musicians all over the place, since we can't all be together, how to make that happen. Office Hours with Kris Johnson. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Office Hours with KrisJohnson.com. There it is. So be sure, go check that out. Go check out one of my other favorite videos that you did with looping was the Andrew Awakes or
Andrew's Awakening.
Andrew's Awakening, and that's another touching tribute. I highly recommend checking that out. Checking out also his original works. I forgot the name of it now, but just everything. Oh, the Safe album. Go check out the Safe album too. This is an entirely digital released music album with original illustrations, original music by Kris, and it's fantastic. But give yourself, block out 30 minutes. Just take 30 minutes of your time, get rid of every distraction that you have in your life right now, and go and check this out. It's amazing. So, again, I want to thank Kris. I want to thank Mr. Bill. I want to thank our wonderful, wonderful live audience today. So many great questions. I apologize we couldn't get to all of them. I see Tim Moyer out there. Good to see you, Tim. One of the live music advocates at the NAMM show. So it's always good to see our community gathered together for these episodes. And we hope you'll join us next time, and we hope you check out Kris's stuff. And until then, if you want to learn more about what we have coming up, visit the Museum of Making Music's website at museumofmakingmusic.org. And until then, be safe, everyone. I wish you well, and I look forward to seeing you again. Take care.